London, 1803. The chandeliers of Almack's assembly rooms cast their golden glow upon the cream of London society. Couples whirled across the polished floor in perfect harmony, a kaleidoscope of silk gowns and tailored evening coats. Yet in the shadowed alcove near the refreshment table, Eleanor Beaumont stood alone, a silent sentinel in her modest lavender gown. At 28, Eleanor had long since accepted her role as the forgotten daughter of Viscount Beaumont. Not that anyone would guess her connection to the three radiant young women currently commanding attention at the center of the ballroom. The Beaumont sisters, Sophia, Caroline, and Lillian, were the diamonds of the season, each more dazzling than the last. "Your sisters have outdone themselves tonight," came a familiar voice. Eleanor turned to find Lady Hartwick, her father's cousin and confidant, sipping punch beside her. "Indeed, Sophia appears to have captivated Lord Penrose entirely. And to think your father was near destitute just 3 seasons ago." Lady Hartwick's eyes narrowed. "One might wonder how he managed such a remarkable recovery." Eleanor's fingers tightened around her fan. Few knew the truth, that it was her inheritance, the money left by her maternal grandmother, that had funded her sisters' seasons and secured their futures. Her own prospects had been the sacrifice. "Providence has been kind to us," Eleanor replied diplomatically. "Providence indeed." Lady Hartwick sniffed. "Though I wonder if Providence will be equally generous when the creditors come calling again. Your father's investments in the West Indies are failing, my dear. Whispers have already begun." A cold dread settled in Eleanor's stomach. The money was gone then, all of it. She had nothing more to give. "I see you understand," Lady Hartwick continued. "The Beaumont name hangs by a thread. One scandal, one whisper of insolvency, and all your sacrifices for your sisters will have been for naught." Across the room, Eleanor caught sight of her father, Viscount Beaumont, his face flushed with wine as he gestured animatedly to a group of gentlemen. At 53, he retained the handsome features that had once made him the catch of his season, though years of excess had taken their toll. Since her mother's death a decade ago, he had sought solace in gambling and ill-advised investments, each more disastrous than the last. "I shall speak with father," Eleanor said finally. "Perhaps there is something to be done." Lady Hartwick's laugh held no humor. "My dear girl, what can you possibly do that you haven't already? You've given everything." The orchestra struck up a new melody, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. A hush fell over the assembly as a tall figure appeared at the entrance to the ballroom. "The Duke of Greystone," announced the footman, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Sebastian Crane, the 5th Duke of Greystone, stood framed in the doorway, his expression as cold and remote as his reputation suggested. At 33, he commanded attention not merely for his title, one of the oldest and most powerful in England, but for the formidable presence he brought with him. His dark hair was cut fashionably close, accentuating the sharp planes of his face and the penetrating intensity of his grey eyes. "Well," murmured Lady Hartwick, suddenly alert. "This is unexpected. His Grace rarely graces these gatherings with his presence." Eleanor observed the ripple of excitement that spread through the room. Mothers with eligible daughters straightened imperceptibly. Young ladies adjusted their curls and practiced their most becoming smiles. "I heard he's finally seeking a bride," whispered a young woman nearby. "Lady Vanessa Caldwell is said to be the front-runner." "Of course she is," replied her companion. "A duke doesn't marry just anyone." Eleanor watched as the duke moved through the crowd, acknowledging greetings with brief nods but engaging with no one. There was something distant in his manner, as though an invisible barrier separated him from the rest of humanity. "Your father is about to make a grave mistake," Lady Hartwick said suddenly, nodding toward where Viscount Beaumont was weaving his way toward the Duke, his gait unsteady. Eleanor's heart sank. "Excuse me, Lady Hartwick." She moved quickly, intercepting her father before he could reach the Duke. "Father," she said quietly, taking his arm, "perhaps you might introduce me to Lady Durham. I've been hoping to discuss her charitable work." "Not now, Eleanor," he slurred, attempting to shake off her hand. "Can't you see? Greystone is here. This is our opportunity." "Father, please." "Viscount Beaumont," came a deep voice, and Eleanor found herself looking up into the impassive face of the Duke of Greystone himself. "I was hoping for a word." "Your Grace." Her father's face lit with undisguised eagerness. "What an honor. May I present my eldest daughter, Miss Eleanor Beaumont?" The Duke's gaze shifted to Eleanor, and she felt a curious sensation, as though those grey eyes could see through every defence she had ever constructed. "Miss Beaumont," he offered a shallow bow. "Your Grace." She curtsied, keeping her eyes downcast as propriety demanded. "I understand you manage your father's household," he continued, surprising her with this knowledge. "I do, Your Grace, and quite capably from what I hear." Before Eleanor could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Lady Vanessa Caldwell had arrived, resplendent in crimson silk that set off her dark hair and fair complexion to perfection. At 26, the widowed countess was considered the most beautiful woman in London, her every appearance a carefully orchestrated triumph. "Ah, there she is," murmured Viscount Beaumont, "the woman everyone expects you to marry, Your Grace." If the Duke was offended by this impropriety, he gave no sign. "Expectations," he said coolly, "are rarely of interest to me, Viscount." His eyes returned to Eleanor, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Beaumont, I should like to call on you tomorrow. There is a matter I wish to discuss." Eleanor stared at him in undisguised shock. "With me, Your Grace." "Indeed." The faintest suggestion of amusement touched his lips. 3 o'clock. "I trust that will be convenient." Without waiting for her response, he bowed again and moved away, leaving Eleanor and her father in stunned silence. "What in heaven's name was that about?" her father demanded, once he recovered his voice. Eleanor shook her head slowly. "I have no idea." But as she watched the Duke's tall figure retreating through the crowd, a strange premonition swept through her. Tomorrow, she sensed, would change everything. The drawing-room of Beaumont House had never seemed so small as when the Duke of Greystone stood within it. His broad shoulders and commanding height seemed to shrink the faded grandeur of what had once been an impressive town residence, highlighting the worn spots on the carpet and the slight discoloration of the once elegant wallpaper. Eleanor sat perched on the edge of the settee, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Across from her, the Duke occupied a wing-back chair, regarding her with that same penetrating gaze that had unsettled her the night before. "You must be wondering why I've come," he said finally. "I confess I am curious, Your Grace." Eleanor was proud of how steady her voice sounded. "I'll be direct, Miss Beaumont. I require a wife." Eleanor blinked. "I see. No, I don't believe you do." A shadow of a smile crossed his face. "I require a specific type of wife. One who understands discretion and duty. One who can manage a household without drama or excessive demands on my time. One who has no illusions about romance." He leaned forward slightly. "I've observed you, Miss Beaumont. You've sacrificed your own prospects to secure your sister's futures. You've managed your father's household through increasingly difficult circumstances. You are practical, discreet, and I suspect, harboring no particular illusions about the nature of marriage among our class." Eleanor felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. "Your Grace, surely Lady Vanessa, is precisely what I do not want." His tone hardened. "A woman whose beauty is matched only by her ambition, who would view our marriage as a stepping stone to social domination." He stood and moved to the window, his profile sharp against the afternoon light. "I have responsibilities that require my full attention, Miss Beaumont. Estates to manage, parliamentary matters, business interests. I need a partner who understands that my focus must remain on these duties." "And you believe I might be that partner?" Eleanor couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "I do." He turned back to her. "There are rumors about your family's financial situation. I know your father has made unwise investments, that his creditors are circling. That without intervention, the Beaumont name will be disgraced within months." Eleanor felt heat rising in her cheeks. "You seem remarkably well informed about our private affairs, Your Grace." "Information is valuable, Miss Beaumont. I make it my business to be well informed." He returned to his seat. "I offer you a straightforward arrangement. As my Duchess, you would have the means to clear your family's debts and secure their future. Your sister's positions in society would be unassailable. Your father would be protected from his worst tendencies. And in return, you would manage my households, attend functions when required, present a united and dignified front to society." His expression remained impassive. "You would be mistress of Silvermere, my principal seat in Kent, as well as my other properties. You would want for nothing material." Eleanor studied him, searching for some hint of his true motivations. "Forgive my impertinence, Your Grace, but why me? Surely there are dozens of young ladies of good family who would accept such an arrangement gladly." Something flickered in his eyes, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. "There are rumors about me as well, Miss Beaumont. Some true, some fabricated. A suitable marriage would put many of them to rest." "I see." And suddenly she did. A convenient wife, respectable but not ambitious, would shield him from whatever whispers followed him. "You require a shield, not a partner. I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement." He rose again, his decision apparently made. "I don't require an immediate answer. Take 24 hours to consider my offer. I'll return tomorrow at the same time." After he departed, Eleanor remained motionless on the settee, her mind racing. The Duke's offer was both salvation and prison. Financial security for her family, but at what personal cost? A lifetime bound to a man who viewed marriage as a business transaction, who had stated plainly that his heart was not part of the bargain. Yet what choice did she have? Lady Hartwick had spoken truly. The Beaumonts stood on the edge of ruin. Eleanor had already sacrificed her youth to her family's needs. Was this final sacrifice so different? When her father burst into the drawing room an hour later, his expression wild with excitement, she already knew what her answer must be. "Is it true?" he demanded. "Greystone has offered for you." "Yes," Eleanor replied quietly, "though how you've heard of it already I cannot imagine. His man of business called on me directly after he left here." Her father paced the room, nearly vibrating with nervous energy. "Eleanor, do you understand what this means? We're saved, all of us, a duke by heaven. And not just any duke, Greystone. He knows about our financial situation," she said. "That's why he's offering." Her father waved this away impatiently. "What does it matter why? The result is the same." "It matters to me," Eleanor said, rising to her feet. "He doesn't want love, father. He wants convenience." "Love?" Her father barked a laugh. "What has love to do with marriage? You're 28, Eleanor. Long past the age when you might expect romantic nonsense. Greystone offers you position, wealth, security, everything we thought beyond your reach." Eleanor turned away, staring out at the small garden behind their home. Once it had been her mother's pride, filled with roses and lavender. Now it lay neglected, much like Eleanor's own dreams. "I haven't given him my answer yet," she said. "He returns tomorrow." Her father gripped her shoulders, turning her to face him. "Eleanor, listen to me. There is no choice to make. By next month we will lose this house. Your sister's marriages will be tainted by scandal. Everything you've sacrificed for will be destroyed." She saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear that had driven him to increasingly desperate gambles. How many times had she covered for him, made excuses, stretched their limited resources to maintain appearances? "I know," she said softly. "I know what must be done." The following afternoon, when the Duke of Greystone returned, Eleanor was waiting. She had spent the intervening hours preparing herself, building walls around her heart, reminding herself that this was simply another duty to be fulfilled. "You've made your decision," he said as soon as they were alone. "I have." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "I accept your offer, Your Grace." Something that might have been relief crossed his face. "Sebastian," he said, "if we are to be married, you should use my given name." "Sebastian," she repeated, the name unfamiliar on her tongue. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small box. "This belonged to my mother," he said, opening it to reveal a magnificent emerald ring surrounded by diamonds, the Greystone betrothal ring. As he slid it onto her finger, his hand brushed against hers, a brief electric contact that sent an unexpected shiver through Eleanor's body. The ring was heavy, its weight a physical reminder of the commitment she had just made. "We will announce our engagement at Lady Ramsgate's ball next week," he said. "The wedding will take place at Silvermere in 1 month's time." "So soon?" Eleanor couldn't hide her surprise. "I see no reason for delay." His expression softened fractionally. "Unless you require more time?" "No," she said quickly. "A month is acceptable." He nodded, satisfied. "My solicitor will call on your father this afternoon to discuss the settlement. I've taken the liberty of instructing him to address the most pressing of your family's debts immediately." Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude despite herself. Thank you. Sebastian studied her for a long moment, his grey eyes unreadable. I believe we will suit, Eleanor, he said finally. We are neither of us given to excessive sentiment or unrealistic expectations. As he bowed over her hand in farewell, Eleanor wondered if he truly believed that, or if, like her, he merely hoped it was true. The journey to Silvermere took the better part of a day, winding through the rolling countryside of Kent. Eleanor, now the Duchess of Greystone after a small but dignified wedding ceremony, watched the changing landscape from the window of the Duke's luxurious travelling carriage, acutely aware of her husband seated across from her. In the month since their engagement, she had seen Sebastian only a handful of times. Brief formal encounters focused entirely on practical matters. The settlement had been beyond generous, their betrothal announcement met with astonishment by society, and the wedding itself conducted with quiet efficiency. Through it all, Sebastian had remained polite, but distant. Now, as husband and wife, they were alone together for the first time, and Eleanor found herself unexpectedly nervous. "We'll arrive before nightfall," Sebastian said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for miles. "I've sent word ahead to ensure all is prepared." "I look forward to seeing Silvermere," Eleanor replied. "I understand it's quite beautiful. It has been in my family for 10 generations. A note of genuine pride entered his voice. "The East Wing dates to Tudor times, though most of the current structure was built by my great-grandfather in the last century." "And you've lived there all your life?" "Until I was sent to Eton at 10, yes." His expression closed again. "My father believed in a traditional education." Eleanor sensed there was more to the story, some old wound that still pained him, but she didn't press. Their arrangement didn't include such intimacies. "Will we have guests immediately?" she asked instead. "I should like to become familiar with the household first." Sebastian's mouth curved in what might almost have been a smile. "I anticipated as much. We'll have a period of privacy before society descends upon us. Though my grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, maintains a dower house on the estate, she will expect to meet you promptly." "I shall look forward to it," Eleanor said diplomatically. Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "You may revise that opinion after meeting her. My grandmother is formidable." "I'm not easily intimidated, Your Grace." "Sebastian," he corrected gently. "And yes, I'm counting on that quality." The carriage crested a hill, and suddenly Silvermere lay before them, its pale stone walls gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight. Eleanor caught her breath. The house was magnificent, a perfect example of classical architecture with symmetrical wings extending from a grand central block topped by a pediment and dome. Extensive gardens stretched away on all sides, and beyond them a lake shimmered silver in the distance. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes." Sebastian was watching her reaction closely. "It is." As they approached, Eleanor saw a long line of servants assembled on the steps to greet them. At their head stood a distinguished older man with silver hair and a dignified bearing. "Harrington," Sebastian explained, "my butler. He served the family since my father's time." The carriage drew to a halt, and a footman opened the door. Sebastian descended first, then turned to offer his hand to Eleanor. As she stepped down, she was acutely conscious of the dozens of pairs of eyes upon her, evaluating their new mistress. Sebastian kept her hand in his as they approached the waiting household. "May I present Her Grace, the Duchess of Greystone," he said formally. Eleanor inclined her head graciously. "I am pleased to meet you all and look forward to becoming acquainted with each of you." "Welcome to Silvermere, Your Grace," Harrington said with a deep bow. "We are honored to serve you." The staff filed past, each being introduced in turn. The housekeeper, Mrs. Wilson, the cook, Mrs. Chambers, the head gardener, Mr. Finch, and dozens more whose names Eleanor struggled to commit to memory. Last came a pretty young woman who curtsied deeply. "Phillips will be your lady's maid," Sebastian explained. "She comes highly recommended." "Thank you," Eleanor said, offering the girl a kind smile. "I'm sure we'll get along splendidly." Inside, the house was even more impressive than its exterior had suggested. Marble floors gleamed beneath their feet as Sebastian led Eleanor through a succession of magnificent rooms. The grand salon with its gilt-framed portraits, the music room with a pianoforte that made Eleanor's fingers itch to play, the formal dining room that could easily seat 30. "Your rooms are in the West Wing," Sebastian said as they climbed the grand staircase. I took the liberty of having them redecorated, but if they don't suit, you need only say the word." "I'm sure they'll be lovely," Eleanor replied, though in truth she couldn't imagine finding fault with anything in this palace that was now her home. The Duchess's chambers exceeded even her heightened expectations. A sitting room in soft blues and creams opened into a spacious bedchamber dominated by a massive four-poster bed draped in silk. Beyond lay a dressing room and a private bathing chamber fitted with modern conveniences that would have been unimaginable in her father's modest home. "Oh," she breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "It's perfect." For the first time, Sebastian looked genuinely pleased. "I'm glad you approve. My rooms adjoin yours," he added, gesturing to a door set into the far wall of the bedchamber. "Though naturally, your privacy will be respected." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm at this reference to the most unspoken aspect of their arrangement. "Of course, thank you. Dinner will be at 8, he continued smoothly. "I thought you might wish to rest and refresh yourself after the journey." "Yes, that would be most welcome." Sebastian bowed slightly. "Then I'll leave you to settle in. Phillips will attend you." After he departed, Eleanor sank onto a delicate chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her new position. She was a duchess, mistress of this grand estate, wife to one of the most powerful men in England, and yet she had never felt more alone. Phillips proved to be efficient and unobtrusive, helping Eleanor change from her travelling clothes into an evening gown of deep blue silk, one of the many new garments that had been commissioned for her trousseau. As the maid arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style, Eleanor studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman who gazed back at her looked different somehow, more poised, more elegant, every inch a duchess. But behind her eyes lurked the same Eleanor Beaumont who had sacrificed everything for her family, who had never expected to marry at all, let alone to a duke. "You look beautiful, Your Grace," Phillips said softly. "Thank you, Phillips." Eleanor managed a smile. "I suppose I should go down. I wouldn't wish to keep His Grace waiting." She found Sebastian in a smaller, more intimate dining room than the grand hall she had been shown earlier. He stood as she entered, his expression warming slightly as he took in her appearance. "The blue suits you," he said, coming forward to escort her to the table. "I hope your rooms are comfortable." "Very much so. Everyone has been most welcoming." Dinner was a quiet affair, the silence broken only by the soft movements of the footmen serving each course. Eleanor found herself studying her husband covertly as they ate. In the warm glow of the candles, Sebastian's severe features softened slightly, revealing a handsomeness she had not fully appreciated before. "You have questions," he said suddenly, catching her gaze. "Please ask them." Eleanor hesitated. "I was wondering about your daily routine, so that I might adapt mine accordingly." "Thoughtful of you." He set down his wineglass. "I rise early, often before dawn. I break my fast lightly, usually while reviewing correspondence in my study. Mornings are devoted to estate business, meetings with my steward, tenant farmers, and so forth. After luncheon, I ride if the weather permits, or attend to other matters if it does not. And in the evenings, dinner as we are doing now." His mouth quirked. "When we have guests, there will be the usual entertainments, cards, music, conversation. When we are alone, I generally retire to the library." "You enjoy reading?" Eleanor asked, genuinely curious. "I do." For the first time, a real warmth entered his voice. "The library is perhaps my favorite room in the house. My father collected extensively, and I've continued the tradition." "I should like to see it," Eleanor said. "I'm quite fond of reading myself." Sebastian regarded her with new interest. "What do you prefer to read?" "History, primarily, and poetry." She hesitated, then added, "Though I confess a weakness for novels as well, particularly Mrs. Radcliffe's." "Gothic romances?" Sebastian looked faintly amused. "I wouldn't have expected that." "They're an escape," Eleanor admitted, "from everyday concerns. We all need such escapes occasionally." He signaled for the footmen to remove their plates. "Would you care to see the library now? It's not too forward of me to suggest." "Not at all. I should like that very much." The library proved to be everything Eleanor could have dreamed. A vast two-story room lined with thousands of volumes, with comfortable seating arranged near the fireplace, and large windows that would flood the space with light during the day. "It's magnificent," she breathed, running her fingers along the spines of the nearest books. I've never seen so many volumes in a private collection. Feel free to read anything that interests you, Sebastian said, watching her with evident pleasure. They're as much yours now as mine. Eleanor turned to thank him and found him standing closer than she'd realized. For a moment, neither spoke, and something electric seemed to pass between them. Then Sebastian stepped back, the moment broken. It's growing late, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Perhaps we should retire. Of course. Eleanor folded her hands before her. Good night, Sebastian. Good night, Eleanor. He hesitated, then added, I hope you will be happy here. As she made her way back to her chambers alone, Eleanor wondered if that were possible. Contentment, perhaps. Security, certainly. But happiness, that seemed a luxury not included in their arrangement. Yet as she lay in her new bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Silvermere settling around her, Eleanor found herself thinking of the way Sebastian's eyes had softened when he spoke of books, the unexpected gentleness in his voice when he'd wished for her happiness. Perhaps, she thought as sleep claimed her, there might be more to the Duke of Greystone and to their marriage than she had initially believed. The weeks that followed settled into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. Each morning, Eleanor broke her fast alone in her sitting room, then met with Mrs. Wilson to discuss household matters. The housekeeper had initially been wary of her new mistress, but Eleanor's genuine interest in learning Silvermere's customs and her respectful treatment of the staff had gradually won the older woman's approval. By the second week, Eleanor had visited every part of the vast house, from the kitchens to the attics, introducing herself to each member of the household and learning their names and duties. She had reviewed the menus, the wine cellar inventory, the linen stores, and a dozen other aspects of running such a grand establishment. Sebastian, true to his word, spent his mornings attending to business. Eleanor saw little of him until the evenings, when they dined together and afterward often spent an hour or two in the library, reading in companionable silence or occasionally discussing books or estate matters. It was a peaceful existence, if somewhat lonely. Eleanor wrote regular letters to her sisters and father, receiving enthusiastic responses about their newly elevated social positions as relatives of the Duchess of Greystone. She tried not to notice the absence of any inquiry about her own happiness. On the 10th day after their arrival, Sebastian informed her over breakfast that they would be receiving their first visitor. "My grandmother wishes to meet you," he said, looking somewhat apologetic. "She's invited us to tea at the Dower House this afternoon." "The Dowager Duchess," Eleanor said, remembering their earlier conversation. "The formidable one." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The very same. Augusta Crane, Dowager Duchess of Greystone. I feel I should warn you she can be rather direct." "I shall endeavour to make a good impression," Eleanor promised. Sebastian hesitated, then reached across the table to briefly touch her hand, the first time he had initiated such contact since their wedding day. "Just be yourself," he said. "She values authenticity above all else." The Dower House proved to be a charming Queen Anne residence set among formal gardens at the edge of the lake that gave Silvermere its name. As their carriage approached, Eleanor smoothed her pale green walking dress nervously. "She won't bite," Sebastian murmured, noticing her anxiety. "At least not immediately." Eleanor gave him a reproachful look, but was secretly pleased by this small attempt at humour. These moments when his reserve slipped were becoming increasingly precious to her. The Dowager Duchess awaited them in a sunlit drawing-room that offered spectacular views of the lake. At 73, Augusta Crane remained a striking figure. Her silver hair arranged in an elegant style that had been fashionable in her youth, her posture straight as a ramrod, her blue eyes, so like her grandson's, sharp and assessing. "So," she said after the briefest of greetings, "you're the girl who has turned society on its ear by capturing my grandson. Do sit down and let me look at you properly." Eleanor took the indicated seat, feeling rather like a specimen under examination. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Your Grace." "Is it?" The old woman's mouth twitched. "We shall see about that. Sebastian, pour the tea. Your grandfather always said a man should know how to serve as well as be served." To Eleanor's surprise, Sebastian complied without protest, moving to the tea service with practiced ease. "Now then," the Dowager continued, turning her piercing gaze back to Eleanor, "tell me about yourself. And spare me the usual platitudes about being honoured to join the family and so forth. I want to know what sort of woman you are. Eleanor considered her response carefully. I'm practical, she said finally. I value honesty and kindness above most other qualities. I enjoy reading and music, though I play only adequately. I believe in meeting one's obligations and keeping one's word. The dowager accepted her tea from Sebastian. And what made you accept my grandson's proposal? We both know it wasn't a love match. Grandmother, Sebastian said warningly. That's enough. Nonsense. If she's to be a Greystone Duchess, she should be able to answer a simple question. Eleanor met the older woman's gaze steadily. Your grandson offered me security for my family and a position where I might be of use. I accepted because it seemed a fair arrangement for us both. Honesty indeed. The dowager's eyes gleamed with something like approval. And now that you've had a fortnight to assess your bargain, do you find it satisfactory? Eleanor was acutely aware of Sebastian watching her. I find Silvermere beautiful and its people welcoming. Your grandson has been considerate and generous. I have no complaints. No complaints. The dowager set down her cup with a decisive clink. A diplomatic answer. Sebastian, I believe I'd like to speak with your Duchess alone for a few moments. Perhaps you might admire the new roses my gardener has cultivated. Sebastian looked as though he might protest, but after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. I'll return shortly, he said to Eleanor, his eyes conveying a silent apology. Once they were alone, the dowager's manner changed subtly. The intimidating grande dame softened into something more human, more vulnerable. I was married at 19, she said, surprising Eleanor with this personal revelation. To a man I had met exactly twice. He was 20 years my senior and intimidating beyond words. That must have been difficult, Eleanor said carefully. It was terrifying. The old woman smiled faintly. Yet we came to love each other deeply. Not at first. That came later, built day by day through small kindnesses and shared experiences. She leaned forward, suddenly intent. My grandson is a complex man, Eleanor. He guards himself carefully and with good reason. His childhood was not happy. She may have been the only one he ever allowed close enough to break his heart. But even then, he never truly let her in. I suppose that's why I never considered it serious. I had suspected as much, Eleanor admitted, though he rarely speaks of personal matters. His father, my son, was a cold, demanding man who saw weakness in any display of emotion. And Sebastian's mother, the dowager sighed. Caroline was beautiful but frail, both in body and spirit. She died when Sebastian was 8, unable to withstand the demands of her position or her husband's neglect. Eleanor felt a pang of sympathy for the boy Sebastian had been. I'm sorry. After her death, my son became even more rigid in his expectations. Sebastian was sent to school far too young, denied the affection he craved, taught that duty must supersede all personal desires. The dowager's eyes grew distant with old pain. I did what I could, but a grandmother's influence only extends so far. Why are you telling me this? Eleanor asked gently. The old woman's gaze sharpened again. Because you have an opportunity I lacked with my own son. To break the cycle. To help Sebastian become more than the armor he wears. I'm not certain he would welcome such interference, Eleanor said. Our arrangement is based on mutual respect and independence. Arrangements change, the dowager said shrewdly. I've watched you both today. The way you look at him when you think he isn't noticing. The way he softens in your presence, whether he realizes it or not. Heat rose in Eleanor's cheeks. Your Grace, Augusta, please, we are family now. The dowager reached out and patted Eleanor's hand. I'm not suggesting you launch some grand campaign to win his heart. Just be patient with him. Show him that vulnerability need not equal weakness. Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened and Sebastian returned. I trust you've finished dismantling my character, he asked dryly. For today. His grandmother smiled innocently. I was just telling Eleanor about my roses. Perhaps you might show her the gardens before you leave. As they strolled among the neatly tended flower beds a short time later, Eleanor found herself watching Sebastian with new eyes, seeing beyond the reserved duke to the wounded boy he had been. She likes you, Sebastian said, breaking into her thoughts, which is more than can be said for most people she meets. I like her as well, Eleanor replied honestly. She reminds me of you. Sebastian looked startled. Most people find us entirely different. In manner, perhaps, But you share the same directness, the same clarity of purpose." She hesitated, then added, "and the same kindness, hidden beneath a formidable exterior." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "You find me kind?" "Increasingly so," she admitted, "though I suspect you work hard to conceal it." For a long moment Sebastian studied her face as though seeing her for the first time. Then he offered his arm again. "We should return to the house. There's a chill in the air." That evening at dinner something had shifted between them. Sebastian seemed more present somehow, asking questions about her day, listening attentively to her responses. When she mentioned her desire to review the charitable works traditionally undertaken by the Greystone duchesses, he offered to have all relevant papers brought to her sitting room the following morning. "My mother established several initiatives in the nearby villages," he explained. "Schools, a small infirmary, apprenticeships for promising young people. After her death, my grandmother oversaw them, but they would benefit from your attention now." "I should like that very much," Eleanor said, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Perhaps I might visit some of these establishments soon." "I could accompany you," Sebastian offered, then immediately looked surprised at his own suggestion. "That is, if you would welcome the company." "I would," Eleanor replied softly. "Very much so." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with possibility. The following days brought a subtle but definite change to their relationship. Sebastian began to include Eleanor in aspects of estate management, seeking her opinion on matters ranging from tenant disputes to the restoration of the East Wing. They rode out together to visit the villages, where Eleanor was received warmly as the new Duchess. At a small school in Thornfield Village, Eleanor knelt to speak with a shy little girl who reminded her of herself at that age. When she glanced up, she found Sebastian watching her with an expression that made her heart skip a beat, something warm and appreciative that vanished the moment he realized she had noticed. In the evenings, they still retired to the library, but now they often read passages aloud to each other, or engaged in spirited debates about literature and philosophy. Eleanor discovered that beneath his reserved exterior, Sebastian possessed both a formidable intellect and a dry wit that increasingly revealed itself in her presence. One night, as rain lashed against the windows and a fire crackled in the grate, Sebastian closed his book and regarded her thoughtfully. "You're not what I expected," he said. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment or a complaint?" "Definitely a compliment." The corner of his mouth lifted. "I thought we would be compatible. I didn't anticipate that I would enjoy your company so much." The simple admission warmed her more than the fire. "I feel the same," she confessed. "Our arrangement has proven more agreeable than I dared hope." "Arrangement?" Sebastian repeated the word slowly, as if tasting it. "Is that still how you think of our marriage?" Before Eleanor could respond, Harrington appeared at the door. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace, but a carriage has just arrived. Lady Vanessa Caldwell requests accommodation for the night. She claims the weather has made travel unsafe." Sebastian's expression closed immediately, all warmth vanishing. "Show her to the blue guest suite," he said tersely. "Inform her we will receive her shortly." When Harrington had gone, Sebastian rose and moved to the fireplace, his back to Eleanor. "I apologize for this intrusion," he said stiffly. "Vanessa has always been persistent." Eleanor felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "Lady Caldwell was a friend of yours. We were briefly engaged 3 years ago." His voice was carefully neutral. "The arrangement ended by mutual agreement." This was news to Eleanor, and clearly contradicted the dowager's assertion that Sebastian had never seriously courted anyone before. "I see." Sebastian turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "Vanessa is complicated. It would be best if I spoke with her alone first." "Of course." Eleanor rose, smoothing her skirts. "I shall retire for the evening." "Eleanor." He reached for her hand, then stopped himself. "Thank you for understanding." But as she made her way to her chambers, Eleanor wasn't sure she understood at all. The sudden appearance of Sebastian's former fiancée, the beautiful widow whom everyone had expected him to marry, seemed too coincidental. And Sebastian's reaction, that immediate withdrawal behind his walls, troubled her more than she cared to admit. Lady Vanessa Caldwell proved every bit as beautiful as her reputation suggested. When Eleanor finally met her the following morning in the morning room, She was struck by the contrast between them, Vanessa's dark, dramatic beauty against her own quieter appearance, Vanessa's confident elegance against her more reserved demeanor. Duchess. Vanessa's curtsy was technically perfect, but somehow still suggested she was doing Eleanor a favor. "How kind of you to welcome me to Silvermere on such short notice." "Not at all," Eleanor replied evenly. "We could hardly turn away a traveler in such weather." Vanessa smiled, a practiced expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Sebastian has always been so very gallant, one of his many admirable qualities." "Indeed." Eleanor gestured to the breakfast laid out on the sideboard. "Please help yourself. His Grace has been called to deal with an issue on the home farm, but he sends his apologies." "How unfortunate." Vanessa selected a piece of toast. "Though it does give us an opportunity to become better acquainted. I've been simply dying to meet the woman who accomplished what so many failed to do, capturing the elusive Duke." Eleanor maintained her composure with effort. "I assure you, there was no capturing involved. Our marriage was entered into with clear-eyed understanding on both sides." "How refreshingly pragmatic." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Though I confess myself surprised by Sebastian's choice. He always professed to value passion above practicality." The implication hung in the air between them, as deliberate as a slap. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm but refused to be baited. "People often present different facets of themselves to different acquaintances," she said mildly. "I'm sure you know His Grace in ways I do not, just as I know him in ways you cannot." Vanessa's eyes narrowed fractionally. "How diplomatic. I can see why Sebastian might value that quality in a companion." Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened and Sebastian himself appeared, looking windblown and slightly damp from the lingering rain. "Forgive me," he said, his eyes going to Eleanor first before acknowledging their guest. "Vanessa, I trust you slept well." "Tolerably." Vanessa rose gracefully, moving to kiss Sebastian's cheek with familiar ease. "Though I've missed our morning rides, perhaps later when the weather clears, for old time's sake." Eleanor saw the flash of discomfort in Sebastian's eyes, though his expression remained polite. "I'm afraid I have commitments today, but your horses will need rest after yesterday's journey. Perhaps tomorrow would be better for travel." It was a dismissal, gracefully phrased but unmistakable. Vanessa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course," she said smoothly. "I wouldn't dream of imposing any longer than necessary." Throughout the day, Eleanor found herself watching the interaction between Sebastian and their guest with growing unease. Vanessa clearly knew Sebastian well, referencing shared memories, using private jokes, touching his arm with casual intimacy. Sebastian remained polite but distant, yet Eleanor couldn't help noticing how he unconsciously positioned himself, always keeping some distance between himself and his former fiancée. That evening, they dined as a trio, the conversation flowing with artificial pleasantness. Vanessa dominated, regaling them with stories of her travels and mutual acquaintances in London, each anecdote somehow managing to emphasize her long connection to Sebastian. "Do you remember that dreadful musical at the Hartleys?" she asked, laughing. "When Sebastian rescued me by claiming an urgent message had arrived." "Vaguely," Sebastian replied, his attention more on his wine than the conversation. "He was always rescuing me," Vanessa continued, her gaze sliding to Eleanor. "So chivalrous. Even when our engagement ended, he insisted on taking all the blame publicly. Wouldn't hear of a word being said against me, though many would say I deserved censure." Eleanor set down her fork carefully. "That does sound like His Grace." "Indeed." Vanessa leaned forward, her voice dropping confidentially. "Though between us, the decision was entirely mutual. We simply realized we were too alike in some ways, too different in others. Passion without compatibility, you might say." Sebastian's jaw tightened visibly. "Perhaps we might discuss something else." "Of course, darling." Vanessa patted his hand. "I forget how you dislike speaking of the past." Later, as the women withdrew to the drawing room, while Sebastian remained briefly for his port, Vanessa dropped all pretense of friendliness. "He'll never love you, you know," she said, arranging herself gracefully on a settee. "Sebastian doesn't allow himself such vulnerabilities." Eleanor kept her expression neutral. "I wasn't aware that I had solicited your opinion on my marriage." "Consider it friendly advice." Vanessa's smile was razor-sharp. "I've known Sebastian since we were children. I understand him in ways you never will. And yet he married me," Eleanor pointed out quietly. Vanessa's eyes flashed. for convenience, for respectability, for all the cold, practical reasons that have nothing to do with the heart. But when he needs passion, when he needs someone who truly knows him, she let the implication hang. Eleanor felt a surge of anger, quickly suppressed. "I think you overestimate your importance in his life, Lady Caldwell, and underestimate mine." Before Vanessa could respond, Sebastian rejoined them, his expression wary as he registered the tension in the room. "I thought perhaps some music," he suggested, moving to the pianoforte. "Eleanor plays quite beautifully." "Does she?" Vanessa's tone suggested skepticism. "How lovely. I should be delighted to hear her." Put on the spot, Eleanor had little choice but to comply. She took her place at the instrument and began to play a piece she knew well, a Beethoven sonata that required more emotion than technical brilliance. As she played, she lost herself in the music, forgetting her audience until the final notes faded away. The silence that followed was broken by Sebastian's quiet voice. "Beautiful," he said, with such sincerity that Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "Charming," Vanessa added, her smile not reaching her eyes, though perhaps lacking the passion the composer intended. "Now, Sebastian, you simply must play that Mozart piece we used to practice together." The evening continued in this vein, with Vanessa constantly maneuvering to emphasize her connection to Sebastian while subtly undermining Eleanor. Yet by the time they retired, Eleanor noticed that Sebastian had positioned himself closer to her on the settee, his hand occasionally brushing hers in what seemed like deliberate reassurance. In the privacy of her chambers, as Phillips helped her prepare for bed, Eleanor found herself troubled by doubts she had thought vanquished. Had Sebastian married her purely because she was the opposite of Vanessa, safe, practical, undemanding? Was passion something he sought elsewhere, as Vanessa had insinuated? A soft knock at the connecting door interrupted her thoughts. Dismissing Phillips, Eleanor wrapped her dressing gown more tightly around herself and called, "Enter." Sebastian appeared, still fully dressed but with his cravat loosened and his hair slightly disheveled, as though he had been running his hands through it in agitation. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "Vanessa's presence here is not coincidental." Eleanor steeled herself. "I had suspected as much. She wrote to me several weeks ago, expressing a desire to reconcile." Sebastian began to pace the room. "I responded clearly that I was married and not interested in renewing our acquaintance. This impromptu visit is her way of ignoring my wishes." "I see." Eleanor hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling her. "May I ask why your engagement ended?" "The true reason." Sebastian stopped pacing, his expression pained. "Vanessa is not a faithful woman. During our engagement, I discovered she was maintaining relationships with at least 2 other men." Eleanor gasped softly. "How terrible for you." "It was illuminating," he said carefully. "I had believed myself in love with her. Her betrayal forced me to recognize that what I felt was infatuation, not love, that I had been seduced by her beauty and charm without truly knowing her character." He moved to the window, staring out at the moon-silvered landscape. "After our engagement ended, I decided that marriage based on genuine respect and shared values would be preferable to one built on passion alone." "And then you found me," Eleanor said softly. "Safe, practical, undemanding." Sebastian turned, his expression suddenly fierce. "Is that how you see yourself? How you believe I see you? Isn't it accurate?" She met his gaze steadily. "You chose me because I was the opposite of Vanessa." "I chose you," he said slowly, moving toward her, "because when I looked at you, I saw strength, intelligence, integrity, everything Vanessa lacks." He stopped before her, close enough that Eleanor could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I never expected to find myself drawn to you in other ways as well." Her heart began to race. "What ways?" "The way you smile when something genuinely amuses you. The way you listen, truly listen, when others speak. The way you've made Silvermere feel like a home again." His voice dropped lower. "The way I find myself thinking of you at odd moments throughout my day." Eleanor scarcely dared breathe. "Sebastian—" "I don't wish to presume," he said quickly. "Our arrangement stands as agreed, but I wanted you to know that Vanessa means nothing to me now, and that you—" He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "What about me?" Eleanor whispered. Instead of answering, Sebastian slowly, tentatively raised his hand to her cheek. His touch was feather-light, questioning. When she didn't pull away, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers, a brief, gentle kiss that ended almost before it began. "Good night, Eleanor," he murmured, stepping back. "I'll ensure Vanessa departs tomorrow, regardless of the weather." After he had gone, Eleanor remained standing in the middle of her chamber, her fingertips touching her lips where his had been. Something had changed between them tonight, something fundamental and irrevocable. The question was, what came next? The morning brought clear skies and Vanessa's departure, her farewells laced with sweet venom and promises to visit again soon. As her carriage disappeared down the long driveway, Eleanor felt herself relax for the first time since the widow's arrival. "She won't return uninvited," Sebastian said, reading her thoughts. They stood side by side on the front steps, not quite touching. "I've made that clear." Eleanor nodded, unsure how to navigate this new landscape between them. Last night's kiss, gentle as it had been, had changed everything and nothing. Sebastian had been unfailingly courteous at breakfast, but had said nothing of their conversation or the kiss that followed. "I thought I might ride out to visit the school in Fernwood today," she said finally. "The headmistress wrote asking if I might present prizes at their midsummer recitation." "Would you like company?" Sebastian asked, his tone carefully casual. Eleanor looked up at him, searching his face. "Yes," she said simply, "I would." The day proved unexpectedly perfect. Warm sunshine, gentle breezes, and the countryside at its most beautiful. As they rode side by side along country lanes, Eleanor found herself sharing stories of her childhood, of her mother's early death, of her determined efforts to keep her sister's futures secure. "So you sacrificed much for them," Sebastian observed, as they passed through a particularly lovely stretch of woodland. "It was my duty," Eleanor replied automatically. "No," Sebastian corrected gently. "It was your choice. There's a difference." At the school, Eleanor was touched by the children's obvious excitement and the headmistress's genuine appreciation for her interest. As she presented small prizes to beaming students, she caught sight of Sebastian standing at the back of the room, watching her with an expression that made her heart quicken. On the ride home, a sudden summer shower caught them halfway to Silvermere. Laughing, they raced for the shelter of an ancient oak, whose massive canopy offered some protection from the downpour. "Your hair is coming down," Sebastian said, reaching up to brush a damp tendril from her cheek. Eleanor was acutely aware of their isolation, the intimacy of the moment. "It always does," she replied, her voice sounding breathless to her own ears. "My maid despairs of it. I like it this way." His fingers lingered against her skin. Wild, free. The air between them seemed to thicken. Eleanor found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by some invisible force. Sebastian's eyes darkened, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her again. Instead, he straightened and glanced up at the sky. "The rain is letting up. We should continue before it starts again." That evening, the strange tension between them persisted through dinner and into their usual time in the library. Eleanor found it difficult to concentrate on her book, acutely aware of Sebastian's presence across from her, the memory of his lips against hers hovering persistently in her thoughts. Finally, she closed her book with more force than intended. "I think I shall retire early tonight," she said, rising abruptly. "Good night, Sebastian." "Eleanor, wait." He stood as well, setting aside his own book. "I feel I owe you an explanation for my behavior today." She paused, her heart racing. "What behavior?" "My inconsistency." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of inner turmoil. "I find myself in unfamiliar territory. Our arrangement was meant to be straightforward, but my feelings have become complicated." "Mine as well," Eleanor admitted softly. Sebastian moved closer, his expression intense. "I told you once that I didn't want passion in my marriage, that I preferred respect and compatibility." "I remember. I'm beginning to think I was wrong." His voice dropped lower. "Or rather that I failed to recognize that respect and compatibility can themselves kindle a different kind of passion. One based on genuine knowledge of another person, not merely physical attraction or infatuation." Eleanor's breath caught. "What are you saying, Sebastian?" "I'm saying that I want more than our original arrangement." He reached for her hand, his touch sending warmth spiraling through her. I want a real marriage, Eleanor, in every sense. She looked up at him, searching his face. Because you desire me. Because I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. And it terrifies me. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable in a way she had never expected from him. Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes. It terrifies me too, she whispered. I never thought to find love in this marriage. I didn't dare hope for it. Sebastian lifted his free hand to her face, cradling her cheek with infinite tenderness. I spent my life believing that love was a weakness, that duty and honor were all that mattered. You've shown me how wrong I was. This time when he kissed her, there was nothing tentative about it. His lips claimed hers with a gentle passion that made her knees weaken and her heart soar. Eleanor wound her arms around his neck, drawing him closer, allowing herself to express the feelings she had been trying so hard to suppress. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he murmured. Eleanor nodded beyond words and allowed him to lead her through the connecting door to his chambers, the final barrier between them falling away at last. Later, as moonlight filtered through the curtains and Sebastian slept beside her, his arm draped protectively across her waist, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point, from a marriage of convenience to something deeper, richer, more profound than either had anticipated. She had entered this arrangement believing that love was not part of the bargain. Now she couldn't imagine her life without it, without him. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Eleanor's life. She and Sebastian settled into a new rhythm, their days filled with shared duties, and their nights with increasingly passionate discoveries of each other. Where once Sebastian had been reserved, now he sought opportunities to be with her, joining her for morning rides, consulting her on estate matters, even surprising her with small, thoughtful gifts that showed how carefully he observed her preferences. A first edition of her favorite poetry collection, a delicate bracelet that matched her eyes. Wildflowers gathered during his morning ride, left on her pillow with a note that made her blush. In turn, Eleanor found herself blossoming under his affection, growing more confident in her role as Duchess and more comfortable expressing her own desires and opinions. The staff noticed the change in their master and mistress, exchanging knowing smiles when Sebastian would reach for Eleanor's hand, or when she would laugh openly at something he said. Even the Dowager Duchess remarked upon the transformation during one of their regular tea visits. "So you've done what I hoped," Augusta said approvingly. "Broken through his walls." "He broke through his own walls," Eleanor corrected gently. "I merely gave him reason to try." Summer faded into a glorious autumn, the grounds of Silvermere transformed into a tapestry of gold and crimson. Eleanor had just begun planning their first major entertainment, a harvest festival for the estate workers and their families, when a letter arrived that would test their newfound happiness. "It's from my sister Caroline," Eleanor said, breaking the seal at breakfast. "She and Lord Barton are in London and wish to visit us at Silvermere." She looked up, smiling. "Would that be agreeable? I've missed them terribly." "Of course," Sebastian replied immediately. "Your family is always welcome here." The letter contained other news as well. Gossip from London about mutual acquaintances, updates on her other sister's activities, and finally, a brief mention that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "What is it?" Sebastian asked, noticing her sudden pallor. "Lady Caldwell has been telling everyone in London that your marriage to me is one of convenience only," Eleanor said slowly, "that you still harbor feelings for her and that I'm merely a placeholder until you can secure an annulment." Sebastian's expression darkened. "Ridiculous. No one would believe such nonsense." "Caroline says many do." Eleanor's voice trembled slightly. "Especially since we've been living quietly at Silvermere rather than taking our place in society." "Then we shall correct that misapprehension immediately." Sebastian rose and came around the table to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "First, by receiving your family with all honor. Then, by journeying to London for the little season. And finally, by showing everyone that our marriage is one of genuine affection and commitment." He kissed her knuckles gently. "Vanessa can spread whatever lies she wishes. The truth will be evident to anyone with eyes to see." Eleanor smiled, reassured by his vehemence. "Then we shall expect Caroline and Lord Barton next week." "Absolutely." Sebastian's expression softened. "I look forward to knowing your family better, Eleanor." They are part of you after all. Caroline and Lord Barton arrived amid a flurry of trunks and servants, bringing with them the energy and gossip of London. Caroline, pretty, vivacious, and dressed in the latest fashion, embraced her sister warmly before casting an appraising eye over Silvermere's grand entrance hall. "Gracious, Eleanor, you've done well for yourself," she exclaimed, "though we hardly see you now that you're a duchess. Too grand for your family, I suppose." "Don't be ridiculous," Eleanor replied, linking arms with her sister. "I've been learning my duties here, but I've missed you all terribly." Lord Barton, a genial man with fashionable side whiskers and an easy manner, shook Sebastian's hand warmly. "Greystone, good to see you again. London's dreadfully dull without you." "I doubt that," Sebastian replied with a small smile. "But we plan to remedy our absence soon. Eleanor and I intend to open Greystone House for the little season." Caroline clapped her hands in delight. "Wonderful, and just in time to quash those ridiculous rumors that horrid Caldwell woman has been spreading." "Caroline," Eleanor admonished gently, "perhaps we might settle our guests before discussing London gossip." The first dinner with their guests proved pleasant enough, though Eleanor noticed Caroline watching Sebastian closely throughout the meal, as if trying to determine the true nature of their relationship. After the gentlemen joined the ladies in the drawing-room, Caroline maneuvered to sit beside Eleanor while the men discussed politics across the room. "Well," she whispered, "is it true what they say? That yours is a marriage of convenience only?" "Of course not," Eleanor replied firmly. "Sebastian and I are very happy together." Caroline looked sceptical. "He's so reserved, though. Not at all like Lord Barton, who wears his heart on his sleeve." "Different men express affection differently," Eleanor said, glancing toward her husband with a smile. As if sensing her gaze, Sebastian looked up and returned the smile, a private moment that made her heart warm. Caroline followed the exchange with interest. "Well," she said, sounding surprised, "perhaps there is something there after all." The days that followed were filled with entertainments for their guests, riding expeditions, tours of the estate, musical evenings, and card parties that included some of the local gentry. Through it all, Eleanor was conscious of Caroline's watchful eyes, measuring each interaction between her and Sebastian. On the third evening, as the ladies withdrew after dinner, Caroline linked arms with Eleanor in the drawing-room. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "Whatever for?" "I believed some of the gossip," Caroline admitted, "but I've watched you together, and it's clear there's genuine affection between you and the Duke. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching, it's rather beautiful, actually." Eleanor squeezed her sister's arm gratefully. "Thank you for seeing the truth. Though I still can't quite believe it's you he fell for, rather than one of us younger girls," Caroline added with a teasing smile. "You were always so determined to be a spinster." "Life takes unexpected turns," Eleanor replied, thinking of how dramatically her expectations had changed in just a few months. The men joined them shortly, and the evening proceeded pleasantly until a footman entered with a silver salver bearing a letter. "For you, Your Grace," he said, presenting it to Sebastian. Sebastian broke the seal, scanned the contents and frowned. "Excuse me," he said, rising. "Estate business requires my attention." After he departed, the conversation continued, but Eleanor found herself distracted, wondering what could have necessitated such an immediate response. When Sebastian didn't return after half an hour, she made her excuses and went in search of him. She found him in his study, standing by the window with the letter crumpled in his hand. His posture was rigid with tension. "Sebastian?" she said softly. "Is something wrong?" He turned, his expression grim. "Vanessa is coming to Silvermere." Eleanor felt her stomach drop. "What? Why?" "She claims she left some jewelry here during her last visit. A family heirloom of great sentimental value." His mouth twisted. "It's a lie, of course. Another excuse to insert herself into our lives. Can't you refuse her? And have her tell all of London I'm keeping her property?" "No." He ran a hand through his hair. "She arrives tomorrow and will stay one night. No more." Eleanor moved to his side, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "We'll face her together." Sebastian covered her hand with his own. "I won't let her come between us, Eleanor. I promise you that." But that night, as they lay in bed, Eleanor found herself plagued by doubts. Vanessa was beautiful, sophisticated, and shared a history with Sebastian that she could never match. The woman's determination to reclaim him was obvious, and her tactics were likely to be as ruthless as they were calculated. "You're thinking too loudly," Sebastian murmured, pulling her closer against him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't help but worry about Vanessa's visit." "Don't!" He pressed a kiss to her temple. "What we have is real, Eleanor. Nothing she says or does can change that." Eleanor wanted desperately to believe him, yet as sleep finally claimed her, she couldn't quite banish the memory of Vanessa's parting words. When he needs passion, when he needs someone who truly knows him. Vanessa arrived the following afternoon, perfectly timed to join them for tea, which now included Caroline and Lord Barton. Her surprise at finding additional guests was poorly concealed beneath a veneer of social grace. "Lady Barton," she said, accepting a cup from Eleanor, "how delightful to see you again, and in your sister's home, no less. How very cozy." "Isn't it?" Caroline replied sweetly. "Eleanor and Sebastian have been the most wonderful hosts. Such a love match they've made of it." Vanessa's cup paused halfway to her lips. "Indeed." Her gaze slid to Sebastian. "How fortunate for all concerned." Throughout tea, Vanessa maintained a stream of conversation laced with subtle barbs and references to her shared past with Sebastian. Eleanor bore it with outward composure, though inside she felt each comment like a needle prick. "Oh, but Sebastian, do you remember that dreadful house party at the Rutherfords?" Vanessa laughed melodiously. "When we got caught in that thunderstorm and had to shelter in the gamekeeper's cottage, you were so gallant, giving me your coat even though you were soaked through yourself." "I remember," Sebastian replied neutrally. "Sebastian has always been considerate," Eleanor said evenly. "It's one of his finest qualities." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Oh yes, considerate to a fault, sometimes to his own detriment. Wouldn't you agree, Sebastian?" Before he could answer, Caroline intervened. "Lady Caldwell, I understand you've been quite active in London society this season. Lady Jersey mentioned you had become quite the fixture at Almack's." The conversation turned, much to Eleanor's relief. After tea, Sebastian excused himself to show Lord Barton the estate's famous trout stream, leaving the three women alone. "Now then," Vanessa said, dropping all pretense of pleasantness once the men had gone, "let's speak plainly, shall we? Eleanor, you must know that Sebastian and I share a connection that goes beyond mere history. We understand each other in a way that you, as a comparative stranger, simply cannot." "I wonder," Caroline interjected before Eleanor could respond, "if you understand him well enough to know how transparent your schemes appear to him. My sister and the Duke are deeply attached. Anyone with eyes can see it." Vanessa's perfect composure slipped for just a moment. "Attachment is not passion," she snapped. "And Sebastian needs passion. He needs challenge. Things your sister, with all due respect, seems ill-equipped to provide." Eleanor had heard enough. "Lady Caldwell," she said, rising to her feet, "you claim to have lost a piece of jewellery here. Let us look for it now so that you may be on your way as soon as possible." Vanessa's smile was triumphant. "So eager to be rid of me? I wonder why." The search for the non-existent jewellery proved as fruitless as Eleanor had expected. Throughout dinner that evening, Vanessa continued her campaign of subtle undermining, dropping references to intimate moments shared with Sebastian and suggesting a depth of understanding that excluded Eleanor entirely. Sebastian, to his credit, remained politely distant with Vanessa, while showing small but clear signs of affection toward Eleanor, touching her hand, seeking her opinion, smiling at her comments in a way that left no doubt as to where his heart lay. Yet later, as Eleanor prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the seed of doubt that Vanessa had so carefully planted. Did she truly know Sebastian? Could she provide the passion and challenge he might need? A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Expecting Phillips, she called, "Enter." Instead, Sebastian stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He looked tired but determined. "Vanessa leaves first thing tomorrow," he said without preamble. "I've made that abundantly clear to her." Eleanor nodded, relieved. "Thank you." "You've been quiet all evening," he continued, moving to take her hands in his. "Has she upset you with her insinuations?" "A little," Eleanor admitted. "She seems so certain that she understands you in ways I cannot." Sebastian's expression softened. "Vanessa knows the man I was, not the man I am. With her I was always performing, being the person she wanted, rather than myself." He lifted a hand to Eleanor's cheek. "With you, I can simply be. That's the difference she will never comprehend. And the passion she claims you need, Eleanor couldn't help asking. The challenge. A slow smile spread across Sebastian's face. My dear wife, he said, drawing her closer, allow me to demonstrate exactly how much passion I find in your arms. Later, lying contentedly in Sebastian's embrace, Eleanor felt her doubts melting away. Vanessa might have a shared history with Sebastian, but Eleanor had his future and his heart. The following morning, Vanessa departed early as promised, her farewell brittle with barely concealed anger at her failed schemes. As her carriage disappeared down the drive, Sebastian wrapped an arm around Eleanor's waist. Let's go to London, he said. Show society the truth of our marriage. Eleanor leaned into his embrace. I'd like that very much. London in November was a far cry from the pastoral peace of Silvermere, but Eleanor found herself enjoying the change. Greystone House, the Duke's magnificent town residence in Mayfair, had been opened and prepared for their arrival, its grand rooms gleaming with fresh polish and seasonal decorations. Their entrance into society caused precisely the stir Sebastian had intended. When they appeared at Lady Hertford's musical evening, their first public engagement, the assembled company fell into a sudden telling hush before erupting into whispers behind fans and hands. They're all watching us, Eleanor murmured as Sebastian led her through the crowd. Let them watch, he replied, his hand warm at the small of her back. They'll see exactly what I want them to see, that I am devoted to my wife. And indeed, throughout the evening, Sebastian remained attentively by Eleanor's side, introducing her to influential acquaintances, soliciting her opinion in conversations, his pride in her evident to all who observed them. Your Grace, Lady Jersey approached them near the refreshment table, her eyes sharp with curiosity. How delightful to see you in town again, and with your Duchess, no less. Lady Jersey, Sebastian bowed slightly. Yes, Eleanor and I felt it was time to enjoy the little season together. The influential patroness of Almack's turned her assessing gaze to Eleanor. Duchess, you've caused quite the sensation by capturing Greystone here. Half the eligible ladies in London were in despair when your marriage was announced. I can hardly take credit for capturing His Grace, Eleanor replied with a serene smile. We simply discovered we were well suited. Indeed? Lady Jersey's eyebrows rose fractionally. Lady Caldwell has been telling a somewhat different tale. Sebastian's expression hardened. Has she? How tiresome of her to spread falsehoods. So they are falsehoods, Lady Jersey pressed, clearly savouring her role as society's premier gatherer of gossip. Entirely, Sebastian said firmly, taking Eleanor's hand in his. My wife and I are exceedingly happy together. Any suggestion to the contrary is born of malice or wishful thinking. Lady Jersey studied them for a moment, noting their clasped hands and the genuine warmth in Sebastian's eyes when he looked at Eleanor. Well, she said finally, I shall make a point of saying so to anyone who inquires. You make a handsome couple, I must say. As the influential matron moved away, Sebastian squeezed Eleanor's hand gently. One battle won, he murmured. Of many to come, I suspect, Eleanor replied. She was proven correct at their next engagement 2 evenings later, a dinner at the home of the Earl and Countess of Harwick. Eleanor found herself seated beside a distinguished gentleman she recognized as Lord Pelham, a close friend of Sebastian's from his university days. I must say, Duchess, you're not at all what I expected, Lord Pelham commented as the first course was served. Oh? Eleanor maintained her pleasant expression. And what did you expect, my lord? He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Well, given Sebastian's history and preferences, I rather thought he'd choose someone more flamboyant. I see. Eleanor took a small sip of wine. Perhaps His Grace's preferences have evolved. They would have to, Lord Pelham agreed, then immediately looked as though he regretted his candour. Forgive me, that was impolite. Not at all, Eleanor said calmly. I appreciate honesty, Lord Pelham, and I understand that many find our match surprising. But I assure you His Grace and I suit each other remarkably well. From across the table, Sebastian caught her eye and offered a small smile that conveyed both support and admiration. The exchange did not go unnoticed by others at the table. You know, Lord Pelham said thoughtfully, I believe you do. I've known Sebastian since Oxford, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. By the end of the week, Eleanor had navigated a succession of similar encounters. Pointed questions, veiled insinuations, and curious scrutiny from Sebastian's acquaintances and London society at large. Through it all, she maintained her composure, neither defending their marriage too vehemently, which might suggest insecurity, nor ignoring the rumors entirely. Sebastian, for his part, made his devotion clear at every opportunity. He requested Eleanor play the pianoforte at musical gatherings, proudly introduced her to influential friends, and most tellingly, kept a polite but firm distance whenever Vanessa appeared at the same events. At last came the true test, Lady Ramsgate's ball, the most significant social event of the little season. Eleanor knew Vanessa would be present and undoubtedly prepared to make one final public attempt to undermine their marriage. As Eleanor dressed for the evening, Sebastian surprised her by entering her dressing room, dismissing her maid with a gentle wave. "I have something for you," he said, producing a velvet box from his pocket. "A gift to mark our first London season together." Inside lay a magnificent diamond and sapphire necklace, the stones arranged in an elegant pattern that complemented the Greystone family tiara Eleanor would be wearing. "Sebastian, it's beautiful," she breathed as he fastened it around her neck. "Not half so beautiful as the woman wearing it," he replied, his eyes warm as they met hers in the mirror. "I want everyone tonight to see what I see when I look at you, the most extraordinary woman in London, and the one who holds my heart completely." The declaration, so open and heartfelt, brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. "I love you," she said simply, "more than I ever thought possible." Sebastian turned her gently to face him, his expression serious. "When I proposed our arrangement months ago, I could never have imagined how completely you would transform my life. I thought I was offering you security, Eleanor. Instead, you have given me joy." He kissed her then, a tender caress that conveyed all the emotions words could not express. When they arrived at Lady Ramsgate's palatial townhouse, the ball was already in full swing. Their entrance caused the now familiar ripple of interest among the guests, but Eleanor found she no longer cared about the speculation. Let them whisper. She knew the truth of her marriage, and so did Sebastian. They had scarcely completed their first dance together when Vanessa materialized before them, resplendent in a gown of deep crimson that displayed her assets to full advantage. "Your Grace," she purred, dipping into a perfect curtsy. "You look positively radiant tonight." "Marriage clearly agrees with you." Her gaze slid to Sebastian, a world of suggestion in her smile. "And you, Sebastian, as handsome as ever, quite like old times, seeing you across a ballroom." "Lady Caldwell," Sebastian acknowledged her coolly. "If you'll excuse us, I believe the next dance is about to begin." "Oh, but surely you can spare me one dance for old time's sake." Vanessa laid a gloved hand on his arm. "Unless the Duchess objects." It was a calculated move. To refuse would make Eleanor appear jealous and insecure. To agree would give Vanessa private access to Sebastian. "Not at all," Eleanor said smoothly. "I'm sure His Grace would be delighted to stand up with an old friend. I shall take the opportunity to rest for a moment." Sebastian shot her a questioning look, but Eleanor gave an almost imperceptible nod. She trusted him implicitly. As they moved onto the dance floor, Eleanor made her way to where the Dowager Duchess sat observing the proceedings with a keen eye. "Well played," Augusta commented as Eleanor joined her, "though I wouldn't have blamed you for refusing." "Sebastian will handle her appropriately," Eleanor replied, watching as her husband maintained a polite but distinct formality with his former fiancée. "And this way, society sees that I have no reason to fear Vanessa's influence." Augusta's eyes gleamed with approval. "You've become quite the strategist, my dear. I always knew you were the right choice for Sebastian." From across the room, Eleanor observed Vanessa's face grow increasingly frustrated as Sebastian rebuffed whatever she was saying to him. When the dance concluded, he escorted her promptly back to her friends and returned immediately to Eleanor's side. "That was illuminating," he murmured, offering his arm to lead her toward the refreshment room. "Vanessa made it quite clear that she remains available should I tire of domestic tranquility," as she put it. "And your response?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. "I informed her that domestic tranquility with you contained more passion and joy than I ever experienced in her company." His eyes held a mischievous glint. I don't believe she was pleased. Eleanor couldn't help laughing. I imagine not. As they sipped champagne in a relatively quiet corner, Lord and Lady Barton found them. Caroline looked triumphant. "Have you heard?" she asked eagerly. "Lady Jersey just publicly snubbed Lady Caldwell, refused to acknowledge her at all. And she's told everyone that she considers your marriage a genuine love match, Eleanor. The tide of opinion has completely turned." "Has it indeed?" Sebastian said mildly, though Eleanor could see the satisfaction in his eyes. "Absolutely," Lord Barton confirmed. "Even old Lord Pelham was singing your praises at the club yesterday, Greystone. Said he'd never seen you so content." Later, as Sebastian led Eleanor into the final waltz of the evening, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The music swelled around them as they moved in perfect harmony, and for a moment it seemed as if they were the only two people in the room. "What are you thinking?" Sebastian asked softly. "That I never expected to be here," Eleanor replied honestly. "Dancing with my husband, wearing diamonds and sapphires, the envy of London society. Regrets?" His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Not one," she assured him. "Though I do miss Silvermere. The peace there, the sense of home." Sebastian smiled, the private smile he reserved only for her. "Then we shall return for Christmas, just the two of us. I would like that very much." As the dance concluded, Sebastian defied convention by raising her hand to his lips in full view of the assembly, a public declaration of his affection that caused a ripple of whispers and approving smiles. Across the room, Eleanor saw Vanessa watching them, her expression a complex mixture of anger and something that might almost have been regret. For a moment, their eyes met, and Eleanor felt a surprising flash of pity for the other woman. For all her beauty and accomplishments, Vanessa had never known the kind of love that now filled Eleanor's life, a love based on genuine respect, understanding, and shared values. With a small nod of acknowledgement, Eleanor turned away. Vanessa belonged to the past. Her future and Sebastian's lay elsewhere. Silvermere welcomed them home with snow-draped grounds and wreaths of evergreen adorning its stately facade. As the carriage drew up before the entrance, Eleanor felt her heart lift at the sight. London had been a necessary battle, successfully fought and won, but this was where she and Sebastian had truly found each other. "Home at last," Sebastian said, helping her down from the carriage. "I've arranged a surprise for you." "Have you?" Eleanor smiled up at him. "What sort of surprise?" "You'll see." He offered his arm, leading her not toward the main entrance but around the side of the house toward the lake. As they rounded the corner, Eleanor gasped. The pathway to the lake had been lined with glowing lanterns, casting a warm, golden light across the snow. At the lake's edge stood a small pavilion, similarly illuminated and decorated with winter greenery. "What is this?" she asked, delighted and bewildered. "The anniversary of our first meeting," Sebastian explained, guiding her along the path. "1 year ago today I first saw you at Almack's, standing quietly in that alcove while your sisters danced." Eleanor stared at him in astonishment. "You remember the exact day?" "I remember everything about that night," he said softly. "The lavender of your gown, the way you tried to prevent your father from approaching me, the moment our eyes first met." They reached the pavilion, where a small table had been set with a simple but elegant supper for two. A brazier provided warmth against the December chill, and a bottle of champagne waited in a silver bucket. "Sebastian, this is lovely," Eleanor said, as he helped her remove her cloak. "But surely our wedding day would be the more traditional anniversary to celebrate." "We'll celebrate that too," he assured her, pouring champagne into 2 crystal glasses. "But this day marks the beginning of a journey neither of us anticipated, the moment fate or providence or simple good fortune brought us together." He handed her a glass, then raised his own. "2 unexpected blessings." "2 unexpected blessings," she echoed, touched beyond words. As they dined on delicacies prepared by Mrs. Chambers, Sebastian seemed almost nervous, a quality so unusual in him that Eleanor couldn't help noticing. "Is something wrong?" she asked finally. "Not wrong," he assured her quickly. "But I do have something I wish to say to you, Eleanor. Something important." He reached across the table to take her hand. "When I proposed our marriage, I offered you a cold, practical arrangement. Security for your family in exchange for your presence as my Duchess. It was a business transaction. Nothing more." "Sebastian," he shook his head gently. "Please, Let me finish. I entered that arrangement believing myself incapable of love, or perhaps unworthy of it. My father had taught me that emotion was weakness, that duty was all that mattered. I had accepted that as truth. His fingers tightened around hers. But you, Eleanor, you changed everything. With your quiet strength, your unwavering integrity, your gentle heart, you showed me that love isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength we possess. Sebastian reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. I gave you my mother's ring when we became engaged, as tradition dictated, but now I want to give you this, chosen by me, for you alone. Inside lay an exquisite ring of sapphires and diamonds, reminiscent of the necklace he had given her in London, but uniquely beautiful. I love you, Eleanor, Sebastian said simply, not out of duty or convenience or arrangement, but with every part of my being. Will you accept this ring as a symbol of that love, as a renewal of our vows, not as Duke and Duchess this time, but simply as Sebastian and Eleanor? Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as she extended her hand. Yes, she whispered. With all my heart, yes. As he slid the ring onto her finger beside the Greystone betrothal ring, Sebastian's own eyes glistened with emotion. I never expected to find such happiness, he admitted. To discover that the arrangement I proposed would lead to the greatest joy I've ever known. Nor did I, Eleanor replied softly. I thought I was sacrificing my own happiness once more for my family's security. Instead, I found everything I never dared dream of. Sebastian rose and drew her to her feet, leading her to the edge of the pavilion. The winter night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky, their light reflecting on the frozen surface of the lake. Look, he said, pointing toward the house. Every window of Silvermere glowed with candlelight, transforming the great house into a beacon of warmth against the darkness. It was beautiful, magical, a perfect symbol of the light they had brought into each other's lives. Our home, Eleanor murmured, our future. And what a future it will be, Sebastian said, drawing her into his arms. I have plans, you know, for the estate, for our charitable work, for our family someday. The mention of family brought a warm flush to Eleanor's cheeks. About that, she said softly. I have news of my own to share. Sebastian's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Eleanor, are you saying? Yes, she confirmed, her smile radiant. Dr. Morrison confirmed it yesterday before we left London. We will have an heir to Silvermere by midsummer. For a moment, Sebastian seemed unable to speak. Then, with a joy she had never before witnessed in him, he lifted her off her feet and spun her in a circle, his laughter echoing across the frozen lake. Careful, she protested, laughing with him. Your heir might object to such treatment. He set her down gently, his hands moving to cradle her face. You have made me the happiest of men, he said, his voice thick with emotion. My Eleanor, my heart, my unexpected Duchess. As his lips met hers in a kiss that held both tenderness and passion, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment, from a marriage of convenience to a union of souls, from strangers bound by arrangement to partners united by the deepest love. Snow began to fall gently around them, soft flakes catching in their hair and on their shoulders as they stood together beneath the winter sky. Behind them, Silvermere glowed with welcome. Before them stretched a future filled with promise. Sebastian had always believed himself immune to love. Eleanor had proven him completely wrong, and in that beautiful error lay their greatest blessing. Dear listener, in the quiet moments after our story ends, as Eleanor and Sebastian stand beneath the winter sky with Silvermere glowing behind them, I invite you to carry a piece of their journey with you. Like Eleanor, many of us have made sacrifices, putting others' needs before our own. We've accepted what seemed practical, rather than daring to hope for what our hearts truly desired. Yet her story reminds us that unexpected joy can find us at any stage of life, even when we believe our best years are behind us. Sebastian's transformation teaches us that it's never too late to lower our defenses and open our hearts. The walls we build for protection can become our prisons, keeping out not just pain, but the very love and connection we secretly long for. Their journey from arrangement to deep affection mirrors what the wisest among us have always known, that lasting love grows not from fleeting passion alone, but from shared values, mutual respect, and the daily choice to see and appreciate one another. As you rest tonight, may you find comfort in knowing that second chances exist, that new beginnings can arrive in unexpected packages, that the heart's capacity for love does not diminish with age, but grows richer, deeper, and more discerning. Like the warm lights of Silvermere against the winter darkness, may you be surrounded by the glow of those who truly see your worth, and may you sleep peacefully, protected by the knowledge that genuine love, whether from family, friends, or a life partner, is a fortress that shelters us through life's harshest seasons. Remember Eleanor's quiet strength and Sebastian's courage to change. Your own story continues to unfold, with possibilities for connection and joy that you may not yet imagine. Sleep well, dear friend. Tomorrow brings another page in your own beautiful narrative. With heartfelt appreciation, Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a like, commenting, and sharing it with someone who needs a little hope and romance in their life today. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for supporting our channel. Your encouragement keeps us going and inspires us to keep creating more stories full of love, redemption, and unexpected turns of fate. Don't miss what comes next. At the end of this video, you'll see another suggested story from our channel. Click and be surprised by another emotional, unforgettable tale. With all our gratitude, the Legends of the Fall Team.